Greetings once again, my friends, and welcome back to Drak Reviews, where today I'm taking on a game that, while I've wanted to know more about the franchise and it's always been very interesting, because of its restriction to handheld games, that's been mainly the reason why I've never picked it up until today, as we take on Monster Hunter World. Like I said, I didn't take on the handheld games because I've kind of mentioned this on the channel a number of times. If I'm going to play a game, I like to sit back and play for a good couple of hours, and with a handheld, that can be rather treacherous, as you can get real nasty knots in your neck and end up in really awkward positions that just end up making the rest of the day harder. So at that point, I don't necessarily like doing that and very rarely make the sacrifice for things I know that I'm going to like, say Metroid Samus Returns, for example. But I've always been interested because I've seen the community that's kind of come around this, including the Game Grumps, including Pro Jared, including many others, and it's always seemed very interesting. And this was as good a time as any to be able to get in, even though it's kind of a take on a Monster Hunter MMO, but it's for consoles. And so I'm really happy to be able to take this on today. But just to kind of bring people up to speed, this is where I'm at as far as knowledge. I know jack. I know like a few things about older games and how to play them, and I'm guessing that those tips kind of work in play with Monster Hunter World, but I know little of the story or anything like that. I know that Capcom makes it, and that's about it. I also know that Monster Hunter was in Marvel vs. Capcom Infinite. I am so sorry about that. But let's go ahead and get things started with the story. So the story here is, I don't know the story of the previous games. Unfortunately, I decided to go in blind and not necessarily do too much homework on it. But the way that it works, like I said, it's an MMO, so you can create your own character, and your character, along with your assistant or handler, are part of what's called the Fifth Fleet. And the Fifth Fleet has been... I'm trying to look for a word other than commissioned by the Research Commission, but that's what happened. They've been tasked by the Research Commission to go out and explore what they call the New World. Specifically to be able to learn more about the New World as its, an uncharted continent, but also to study what are called Elder Dragons. I did at least a little bit of homework on this, and the way that I understand Elder Dragons work is that they are big dragons, but they're so big that they can actually affect entire ecosystems, which would make sense because on our way to the New World, we are then halted by a big freaking dragon / volcano called Zora Magdaros. And unfortunately, he kind of wrecks our ship, but it's okay because he dropped us off at the New World. So he's very conscientious that way. But while we're at the New World, it's up to us to basically explore the new terrain, work with the existing fleets that were already there, to be able to establish new ground, be able to do homework on the territory, as well as being able to either capture or learn more about Zora Magdaros and all of the other beasts that roam the land. So as far as story is concerned, that's the most that I can actually come across, at least in my playthrough of it, is like you're still kind of exploring the land. I have been told that there's more plot to it, and eventually we do get to have some really cool reveals as this being an MMO. But I just gotta say, considering the story that I have, a lot of people might consider that I took points off from it. But in this case, no, I didn't. In a lot of these cases where stories can tend to be very vague, and they shouldn't be, that's where I probably would. But considering that this is an MMO, it's supposed to be throwing you into a world that you're either familiar with or you're not, it works here. It actually works to be able to put them into a new world that's uncharted territory so that you can go and explore it. I don't know if the aim is to later add in areas that you've explored. I don't think it is, because the way that the people talked in this game is that it is kind of a one-way trip. So I don't know if we're going to get expansions that give us old stuff, but I actually kind of like the premise that they don't, because at these points, like, they can add other continents that maybe haven't been explored yet. And then maybe like near the end of its lifespan, you can add in the older stuff. But yeah, I didn't take really anything off of it because as I'm kind of getting, or as I'll get into in later subjects, I really just don't think story is the heart of what makes this game tick, if that makes sense. There is a story there, and it's good. It at least gets you interested and wants you and urges you to explore more. But really, the other facets of the game are what kind of hold this together. So I really didn't take too many points off of this one. It's fine the way it is. Moving on into visuals. So I can't necessarily argue that this is a pretty game. I have no ground on that whatsoever. It is a pretty game. I like a lot of the models that you can do for character creation, as well as, since this is kind of my first exposure to some of the monsters that have been created by Capcom, it's awesome. I don't know any other way to think of it. Like, every time you get the discovery of a new big monster, it's satisfying in the fact that, yeah, you realize that you're not necessarily the top of the food chain anymore, and that sucks, and you're gonna die. But at the same time, you're like, oh my gosh, it's a T-Rex with fur. What? I never would have imagined that. Or another one, it was like a flying lizard kind of thing, but as soon as I looked at it, I'm like, dude, that's Vertigo from Primal Rage. It's got like a snake hood to it. It's awesome. So the monster, and from what I understand, a lot of fans applaud the series for its monster design. And you know what? It deserves that wholeheartedly. The characters, they're characters. I also did appreciate our little cat buddies. Unfortunately, I can never remember what they're actually called. I think it's palicos. I did like those, the way that they looked. In fact, people might notice that I kind of poked fun with my little palico being named after the Shadow Blazer himself. But I like the world. I like the monsters. I like a lot of the character models. I like the outpost. It all works for me visually. What I'm basically saying is I didn't take too many points off of this. Yeah. Moving on into gameplay. This is where, in my opinion, the story kind of gets forgiven, because the gameplay is what makes a Monster Hunter game shine, especially from fans that I've been able to talk to throughout the years while being interested but not wanting to pick this up on handheld. So at that point, like, the gameplay, while a little complicated, isn't necessarily, like, once you get into it, once you've killed a couple of monsters, it feels like rocket science when you walk in, but it doesn't feel like that as soon as you get a couple of kills under your belt, so to speak. And the only way that I know how to describe it is like with any other MMO. You walk in, you're completely unfamiliar with how it works, but eventually we all start at level 1 and we start learning, and it gets less and less complicated as you go along. And there are actually a lot of interesting MMO shortcuts that this game in particular does that I really appreciate, especially in regards to crafting. I don't know if this is a thing for previous Monster Hunter games, but being able to, like, instantly craft potions the second you come across the necessary reagents. For example, when you come across like a beehive, you can instantly take your potions and make them mega potions. You don't have to go into like a different sub menu and create it. This game just instinctively says, oh, you came across this, you get this. And I really do like that concept as a whole. I do like the fact that you do have different weapons that you can start out with. Like, you don't get set into a gun or a bow or an axe or anything like that. You can kind of mess around with it, and each weapon has its own particular talent tree to be able to help incentivize you to either stick with that and mess around with it, or you can mess around with another weapon and it doesn't necessarily hurt you in this regard. As to the hunts themselves, they're pretty straightforward, and the way that I would think a Monster Hunter game would handle it. Like, you have to track the beast. As soon as you come across it, and you beat it into a pulp enough, it runs away. You have to go find it again, and you have to go do more damage to it. I'm okay with it, and one of the things I really liked in my playthrough of it is that very rarely did I actually have to rely on multiple people coming in to help me with a hunt. And the funniest thing is, a lot of the hunts that I came across did require that. I could still do them solo, so I will compliment Capcom for allowing that to happen and allowing me as the player, or as a player, to go through it at my own pace. I really did appreciate that, and the gameplay is just so solid and strangely addictive. Like, I'm usually a story gamer. I like story, and that's what keeps me in there, but this one was the opposite. If I was, like, the perfect example with MMOs is, like, I play World of Warcraft because I love story. I love the story that's going on. This one, the gameplay is so addictive that that's really all the reason that I've ever had to go to it. I don't need to necessarily know, like, what happens when we eventually catch a Zora Magdaros. I'm just more interested in going and hunting the various monsters and being able to see new monster designs. So I really do think that the gameplay works here. Moving on into audio, the music is awesome. I've already heard a couple of the themes from Monster Hunter, especially the big exploration theme that the series is known for. I love it. I love the music that they came up with for this. It feels like exploring. It feels like going into uncharted territory, and each new territory has its own little twinge to the music that makes it unknown, unfamiliar, as well as inviting, welcoming. Come learn what this desert has to offer, kind of thing. Come learn what this jungle has to offer. And I like that. I like when you have engaging music that keeps you in the flow of everything and keeps you immersed. The voice cast, I'm not going to say is bad. Unfortunately, you don't hear too much of it. While the line reads that I do actually get voice stuff for is good, and I'm not necessarily saying it's bad. I really wish that, we could have taken the whole Old Republic approach and voiced a little bit more, especially with the interactions with the handler. There are a lot of times where I think she's got some really good line reads that are not read by a voice actress. Instead, the tutorial stuff is. And I'm like, well, I would love to be able to have the story interactions with the handler be more voiced. And that's really my only complaint with it. There's no problem with the performances whatsoever. The ones that I've come across have been good enough. So I didn't really take any points off for audio either. Replayability. Yeah, it's an MMO. I can't really add too much onto this one. It is replayable. They, from what I understand, they add in seasonal hunts, and they just barely have talked about adding in Final Fantasy XIV content and a bunch of other content that could be provided for it. And from what I understand, the game is fairly popular at this point, so I could see even more stuff getting added later on. But it's an MMO, so the replayability is entirely there. And I don't necessarily have any complaints with it. Like I said, the gameplay is pretty damn addictive, and I don't necessarily need a story to keep me in there. I just want to go do the next hunt. I want to be able to go and make my way to the next set of armor, kind of thing. And that's really all I need here. So the replayability is definitely here in Monster Hunter World. Moving on into presentation, does it all come together to be able to flow very well? And I would actually say yes, it does. Capcom has done very well with this franchise from what I understand in the previous entries, but given what I've seen of Monster Hunter World, it only piques my curiosity where they can go from here. I know that World will probably exist for a long while, but I kind of hope that we get the singular installments, the ones that usually come out on handhelds, more towards consoles, especially since a lot of those go towards the 3DS. And I would love to be able to see a Monster Hunter on Switch. That would be awesome. I don't know if World is going to make it there, but it would be cool to have like an offshoot of Monster Hunter come to Switch, and that way I can kind of play. The perfect example I can think of is like bring an older game, and that way I can be able to play it either on the go or at home. Most of the time I'd play it at home. So yeah, the presentation all comes together into a nice, neat little package. And that's why I have no problem giving Monster Hunter World a 9 out of 10. While there are some little things here that I could nitpick about, it all comes together in an awesome package, honestly. Like, I came in with certain expectations for the Monster Hunter franchise, and I only feel like the sky is the limit. Like, we could continue to improve on World itself. We could continue to improve on newer editions, which I understand there are newer editions that are coming soon. So it actually makes me want to go maybe try some of the 3DS editions out. And yeah, so 9 out of 10. I really do like this game, and I can recommend it to a lot of people. But is it worth it? Currently, you can get Monster Hunter World for PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and it is coming soon to PC for Steam users. And you can get this available at $59.99 brand new. Is it worth it at that price? Absolutely. Considering that it is an MMO, like it is going to be a big game with a lot of content, and considering that the content is as engaging as it is, I have no problem recommending this. I mean, if you can get it on sale, great, good on you. I recommend that you do that, just because you save some money in the process. But at $60, this game is worth it. Capcom's done an amazing job with it, and I look forward to more and more console installments in the future if they can make that work. And I'm like I said, do it for Switch. I don't care. Do it for PS4. Awesome. I'll even, like, if you made it Xbox One exclusive, I'd probably buy the next one. I'd have no problem doing that. But yeah, this is definitely worth it at new price, used, however you can get it. And that's going to go ahead and do it for this review of Monster Hunter World. Thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys so much for your continued love, support, and patience with the channel. I really do appreciate it, as well as for the reviews. And of course, I'll be back in time for the next review.